My guest today is Dr. Whitney Casares, a board-certified pediatrician, author, and founder of Modern Mommy Doc. We'll be diving into her book, Doing It All, Stop Overfunctioning and Become the Mom and Person You're Meant to Be. Dr. Casares, thanks so much for joining me today. This is a book that I would say 99% of mothers out there can relate to. You know, whether you've got an infant or 3 kids that are in middle school, or whether you've got high schools, whether you work from home or you don't work outside the home, or, you know, I think all mothers feel like I'm just not getting enough done. And we go to bed at the end of the day with this sort of list in our heads of things that we did do, but a whole lot of things that we didn't do. And in your book, Doing It All, you talk about how many moms, yourself included, feel the pressure to just overfunction. We take on too much. Why do we feel this way?
You're right. I think that this is how most moms feel. We just had the new US Surgeon General report that showed that almost half of parents feel like they are burning the candle at both ends so much that they feel like they can't function at all, which is terrible. We know the effects of that on kids, on their health. And so applaud you for having me on to talk about this important issue, because it really is a mental health crisis for parents and for their kids. The reason parents feel this way, and moms especially, is multifactorial. So number one, it's because we are the ones that carry the mental load in our families. Society is not set up to support us. We know that for a long time, it's been women just in the household being kind of the default at home, but now we have women in the workforce as well. And so many of us work a double shift. We go to work, we get paid for the work that we do in the office or at our remote jobs, and then we are expected still to be the ones who carry everything at home. And so that shift, even though we want it to happen right now, has not happened in our households where we have more equity with our partners, especially in heterosexual relationships. And that's true even in my house, even though we talk about it and we work on it all the time. The second is the fact that we are conditioned as women, and have been for a long time, to be pleasers, to put others' needs before our own. And so we keep on doing and doing and doing in order to find more value and in order to feel like we have more worth. And the more, unfortunately, technology that we have, the more kind of hacks that we have, it almost feels like it's easier to add more and more to our list, which makes us even more stressed. And then, of course, we have the mental health care, or the mental health crisis that is happening just in general. So many of us are anxious. So many of us are feeling sad, feeling depressed. And a lot of times we cope with those feelings in ways that are unproductive. You know, the Taylor Swift song, like, I'm so productive. I cry a lot, but I'm so productive. We use being productive. We use doing more and more and more, keeping ourselves busy, as a way to avoid those deeper emotions that we face. So a lot of different things at play. And in my book, I'm really trying to address, while we work on all the systemic change, on policy change to make things more equitable in the household and at work, what are the things that we can do in our own personal lives? Because I don't know about you, but I am not willing to wait until the world changes for me to have a life that I can feel happy in and present in.
Yeah. You know, we hear a lot about social media and its effects on kids. And we know it's extremely dangerous for many reasons, for girls in particular to be on social media, and not just to be on it, but they spend a lot of time. But we really don't hear a lot about the effect of social media on mothers. Can you talk a little bit about that? And because that's a fairly new phenomenon in the past 15 years, I'd say, where mothers are shifting their thoughts about life and their thoughts about themselves because of social media. Can you dive into that a little more specifically?
Mhm. Absolutely. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, in America, we are all about keeping up with the Joneses. And so we all want to kind of be at the same level as everybody else. And our kids' extracurricular activities and their performance in school or their performance on the field, sometimes we use that as a measure of our own value, which is unfortunate. I also think the rise of social media and kind of Instagram, Pinterest, where we're able to make things look like they're perfect, That also drives this feeling of I need to do more. And then the lack of community that we all have. So we used to all derive a lot of value, a lot of satisfaction from the relationships that we had in our spheres. So it would be in our neighborhood, it would be potentially in our religious communities. And we know that people are more disconnected than they've ever been. And so they're finding ways to be connected to other people. And it's pretty easy to overdo it in those areas in order to feel like we're connected enough or like we're doing enough to fill that void. I think that there are a lot of people that are on there that are trying their best to be helpful. And I use social media all the time to reach moms and to tell them messages that I think are going to be helpful and supportive. And it's a great place to show empathy for other moms and to feel a little bit of a sense of community. So it can be good from that perspective. But I think the other thing that happens on social media is twofold. Number one, we see these perfectly curated images, filtered images of what people look like, what their homes look like, how their kids are behaving. It used to be that the grid on Instagram in particular was like, you wanted it to be that everything had exactly the same filter so that it all looked like very homogeneous and aesthetic. Thankfully, that's shifting a little bit, but that still, I think, is in our minds of that is the goal, is for everything to be perfect. It just reiterates this desire for us to keep up with everybody else and this feeling of we're less than because our lives don't look like that. Our kids can't pose beautifully for a picture. Our kids aren't well behaved. Kind of that influencer model of people being on there and showing these picture perfect families. So that's number one. I think the other thing, which is even more dangerous in some regards, is this idea of influencers and even experts using catchy phrases or catchy solutions like 3 steps to help your kids be well behaved. You know, this is a script that you can use exactly with your kids to make them stop having tantrums. This is something you can do to make your morning perfect with your kids. This is a solution. And I think when we get into that, it's very dangerous for parents because then when their kids don't follow the book, which they don't because they're humans, we know that kids are going to have bad days, moms are going to have bad days, then parents feel very disillusioned and like there's something wrong with them, as opposed to understanding that nothing works in A equals Z formula every single time. A lot of times there's a lot of nuance that we have to put in there, and that gets lost in translation in social media.
You know, and in addition to that, I think there's a lot of very bad sort of toxic advice out there. And one of the things that's a problem is
Mhm.
it seems to me that if something's written on the internet, whether it's social media or not, it becomes truth to many people, and we sort of pick and
Right.
choose our truth. And so whether you're getting the ABC from some, professional guru, whatever, there's always on another side some other kind of advice from somebody that may be just as hurtful. So what I'm hearing you say, particularly as far as social media goes, that women in many ways are putting pressure on other women without knowing it. Sort of, this is what my life
Yes,
looks
I
like.
think
Yeah. Yeah.
unwittingly.
This is what my life looks like and my kids. And I'm so excited and I'm so proud. And then I read it and go, well, my kids aren't that way. And so something that's kind of, it seems to be entertaining and fun because we want to catch up to what our friends are doing, can really, really bring us down. So I would encourage mothers out there listening to really sort of dial back on that and spend less time on social media. You developed the Centered Life Blueprint to help working moms realign their priorities. I assume when you say working, you mean working outside the home for pay, right?
I believe that all women are working women, all moms are working moms. They are all doing that hard work. Some of it is paid labor, some of it is unpaid labor, but every group, everyone who's in a different situation has their own pain points. And so those who are career minded and are working for pay tend to have different struggles than people who are solely in the home with their children. And so my work is meant to primarily help those that are career minded. But that said, I've had plenty of men, I've had plenty of dads, I've had plenty of childless people read the book and say, oh, that was so helpful to me too.
So can you explain how the blueprint works and how it helps moms, sort of manage that stress of work and family and
Yes.
self-care?
So, first and foremost, it asks moms and invites moms to re examine what are their values, what are the things that they care the most about in life, And what are the things that they can contribute to the world as a key differentiator for themselves? What are the things that only they can bring to the table that light them up, that bring them joy, that bring them contentment, that make them feel fulfilled at the end of the day? And to combine those things into what I call the center points. And I have people define 5, and I show them exactly how to do that. 5 is not a magic number. I picked 5 because it's easy to remember. 10 is too many. You can't remember 10 and write a list down. I want it to be that you can count them on your hand. So 5 things that at the end of the day, you can say, this is where I want to put my time, my energy, my attention. These are things that I want to say yes to every single day. Couple examples for me is connection with my kids and the health and well-being of my kids. And I do not mean that I'm taking my kids to 80 million activities. I mean, what are the things that are going to make it so that we build core memories or that they grow and that they thrive as individuals over time? Those things I want to say yes to. For example, I just flew back from a work conference last minute to be able to be there for my child going to outdoor sleepaway camp for 5 days. My oldest child is autistic. I knew this was a huge deal for her and that she needed me to be there because this was a growth moment for her. There are plenty of times, however, that she needs to get to school and that I am not the person that's in charge of that because that is not a core moment. That is not something that's really special for us or for her. I don't need to be involved in that. One of the other center points that I have in my life is speaking and writing to women. So whenever there is a request on my time to do that, and it feels like it's going to be impactful, it's going to be actually meaningful for people, it's almost always a yes. So we all have yeses that we want to say yes to in our lives. And then there's also a bunch of things that we have to get done, but that shouldn't define us, but that tend to in our lives, unfortunately, if we're not careful. So believe it or not, you can probably relate to this. I can relate to this. Laundry is something that takes way too much time in our lives that makes it feel like we're drowning and like we're unsuccessful, which is crazy. The dishes can feel like that. All of those extracurricular activities can do that. The requests in our time to bake cookies for the PTA. I mean, all of these things are things that sometimes have to get done or have to at least be attended to, but we don't want them to crowd out all of the things that matter the most to us. So in the book and in the Centered Life Blueprint, I walk through what are ways to define what you want to say yes to, those center points, and then how do we deal with all the rest of it? And I break it into 4 categories of all of the rest of the junk that needs to be kind of pushed to the edges of our lives and not take up so much of our brain space or our energy.
Well, even though it sounds like even though you can put those 5 things down that are most important to you, there still is life to live around it. You have the laundry, you have kids crying, you have sick children. Um, so, so, so we're still jamming a lot into our days, though. Correct?
So that's why I really want people to have strategies to be able to deal with those things. And I divide it into 4 categories. So number 1 is the non-negotiables. These are the things that you are responsible for and only you. And some of the strategies that I teach moms to do in the blueprint is to use selective mediocrity to decide this is something that doesn't need my full effort at all. I'm going to kind of half give my effort to it. This is something that I need to do in a streamlined way or build more efficiency around it. For example, in my life as a physician, I need to build more streamlined efficiency around my notes. And so I use a lot of AI work to create dot phrases and to make things a lot faster in terms of making it so I can get that done, but it doesn't take too much time. Then there are things that I call the swappables that need to be given to somebody else in your house. So you don't need to be the one that does it. So that could be chores that your kids could be doing. That could be giving some of the load to other people in your parenting village. So a neighbor who could maybe help with pickup or that you could swap with. They're going to do some grocery shopping for you and you're going to be picking up kids. And then there are the contaminators. These are all the things in our lives that kind of add fluff, but don't do anything for us. So in that section of the blueprint, I talk a lot about how do I take away clutter in my house so that there's less to pick up? How do I take away clutter in my schedule so that there are fewer things that I need to take my kids to? And then finally, there are the heartstrings, which are all the things that we need to do, but they can suck up our energy. We can feel really guilty about them. One example that I use in the book is my dad, who has Parkinson's. And he is one of my favorite people in the world. And also emotionally, it drains me to be with him for extended periods of time. And so I have to choose the times that I'm going to really give to his medical needs and to the emotional needs of my mom, who's his caretaker, in ways that doesn't make it so that then I'm totally flat out for the rest of the day and can't do anything else for my family or for my professional life. So I 100% agree. We can't just forget about all the other stuff that has to happen. I think it's about building strategies. The problem is a lot of the people that are out there that are giving advice to moms about how do I get all this stuff done? How do I make it so that I can cross more stuff off my list? They're starting with the strategies first. And when you do that, what it does, if you don't have something else that you want to say yes to or something else that you're doing it for, it makes it so that moms just add more to their list. Because like we talked about at the top of the show, we're so conditioned to just keep on going, to add more, to be more productive in order to have more value. So we have to start first with kind of paring it down to what I want to say yes to so we can get all those other things done.
There are different phases that we go through in our lives, and those 5 priorities are going to change as time goes on because family structure changes, kids get older. And how do you sort of reorient every few years? Because one child's going to go away to college, others are going to be home. So do you help parents or mothers sort of flex with that, or what advice do you give for mothers whose the construction of the home ecosystem, if you will, is changing?
That's a great question. I actually think that this changes every week. It changes every
Yeah.
month. It changes depending on what is the thing that your kids need at that moment. What do you need at
Hmm.
that moment? Where are you in your career? I consider motherhood and this framework a journey. So not something that you achieve it, is set in stone. This is exactly how I live my life. Instead, something to come back to, a North Star, because what I find is that a lot of moms, they feel so overwhelmed by their lives and by all the things they have to do that they then get paralyzed and they feel like they can't do anything. They want to just pull the covers up over their heads. I mean, back to that US Surgeon General report, right? Of like, I can't even function and do anything. And so what I invite moms to do is to build this framework for themselves, do the hard work of kind of laying it out, developing something, a blueprint for themselves, and then revisit it, every 3 months, revisit it every 6 months, but also revisit it in small ways in their head. Like, okay, am I moving toward the goals that I really want to have? Am I actually in alignment with my values? Have my values changed? Is there something that I need to do? Whenever they feel that sense of like, ugh, I feel misaligned, I feel like things are not going the way that I hoped that they would in my life.
And are these goals personal goals for mothers or goals for their kids? For instance, what I would want to do during a day versus what I feel my kids need to do, what I need to do to better their lives can often be opposite. So, how do you choose?
That push and pull of what are our own personal needs and what are the needs of the people that we love and that we need to take care of and that we have to be mindful of. So I think that they actually can coexist. I think that when you're in the pocket, that you're able to take care of your needs and your children's needs well, and like you said, to flex. So I know that if I am making my kids feel by my decisions professionally like they are unloved, like they don't matter, like they are not prioritized at all in my life, then if I'm doing that just for my professional gain, I'm missing the mark. I'm not doing right by my kids. If my kids are upset with me because I wouldn't buy them a pony, I mean, that's not on me. That's like kids and you have to learn and that's life and whatever, right? Or like, I can't spend every single moment with my kids. For example, actually, I'm about to go on a business trip. I am going to be gone during Halloween. My kids are very upset about this. They have told me that they wish that I would be home on Halloween and that they consider it a major holiday. I do not consider it a major holiday. And so one thing that I do to flex in that situation is to say, okay, well, I'm not going to be there on Halloween. I have to be gone for this professional endeavor that I care a lot about personally. But how can I balance that with what your needs are too? So my husband is going to be hosting a Halloween party for my kids so that they're distracted and so that they have a lot of fun on the event. I am going to go with my kids to a bunch of Halloween type of activities beforehand so that we feel like we still get that tradition and that magic of Halloween together. Pumpkin patches and a little haunted house that they wanted to go to. And we have a conversation together about, I understand these are your needs. I care about you deeply. How can we make sure that the holiday still feels special to you? And how can I make sure that I fulfill this obligation that I have, which allows me to buy you the costumes and make it so you can go to the haunted house and host the party and all of those things that you want to do. And so I think it's about that. I think it's about thinking about what are the goals within your parenting and within your professional life. And always kind of re-examining, like, am I pushing too hard in one direction? Am I giving so much to my kids that I'm losing myself, that I feel like I'm a martyr, that I feel like I'm resentful? Because that's no good for anybody. We know that in the end, that's going to come out with you not being the parent that you actually want to be. Another good example, my daughter right now, we're recording this podcast and I heard her downstairs say, Mom, well, my daughter knew ahead of this podcast that I had to record this podcast for the next hour, and that after that, I would be taking her to school. Before we hopped on the podcast, I was with her, helping her get dressed, helping her get her breakfast together. So I think that's the push and pull, is setting really those strong boundaries around, this is what I need, but also I invite you, what is it that you need? And let's work together to make sure we both have our needs filled.
Yeah. And I think the key thing is to involve your kids in the process and to acknowledge that need. I know
Mm-hmm.
that Halloween's important to you. I know that, doing this together is important. So I can't do specifically that, but I can do something else. Why do women have a hard time setting boundaries and saying no in general?
Yeah, I think this comes back to the conditioning that we have to please other people. I think that we're taught from a very early age, and not just I think, I mean, the studies show that we're taught from a very early age to take the temperature of others before we take our own temperature, and to find a lot of value in being pleasing to others. I just finished watching The Tudors, the thing that's all about, King Henry VIII and all of his wives. And my goodness, when you look back at
Yeah.
what women were doing in the 1500s to try to win the favor of men and make sure that they were okay and taken care of, it makes a ton of sense that we're conditioned this way. I mean, that's how women survived for a long period of time when they couldn't provide for themselves. That's why it's amazing that we have women in the workforce who can make their own money and be independent and not have to be dependent on men. But I think that it comes a lot out of that. There's a lot of relearning that we have to do as women and as people. There's also that kind of like good girl mentality that we grow up with, of like, I want to be the good girl. I want to make sure that I'm not disappointing anybody. So I think a lot of it comes from that. We didn't have the modeling that we really needed, most of us, as we were growing up. The good news is it's a journey, but there are ways to flex that muscle, to exercise that muscle of not ignoring other people's needs, but making sure that we're not putting other people's needs above our own every single
Mhm.
day, that we're still the main character in the movie of our lives.
Well, and it's hard because the truth of the matter is, you and I know as pediatricians that kids need a lot emotionally, physically.
Mm-hmm.
They need to feel connected. They need attachment. They need us to be there for them. And it's hard. I mean, it's really kind of hard to balance because if you're not recognizing what your kids really need and when they really need you, um, you can do a lot of harm to your kids. On the other side, if you feel they need too much, then you're overdoing it. So it really is hard to kind of find that balance. Are there times when, well, I've seen it, and I'm sure you've seen it too. Talk about women who sort of overdo it, who really, the ones who are working 60, 70 hours a week, and they're just driven by their work and their careers, and their kids are sort of going by the by. How do women recognize tipping the balance and and yeah, spending too much time focusing on what we want and are driven to do and not enough time the other way? Because we know we teach women and mothers,
Mhm.
okay, you're spending too much time with your kids, you're not taking care of yourself, you're putting everybody
Mhm.
in front of you. But then there are those who go the other way. So how do you identify if you're in the latter category?
Yeah. Okay, this is going to sound like a woo-woo answer, and you and I, as scientists and doctors, aren't going to feel good about the woo-woo. But this is from psychologists, so it's not just
Mhm.
it's going to feel woo-woo, but it's not woo-woo. This is the number one way, is to start to become more aware of how you're feeling. So if you are feeling constantly like I'm in the shower, it's a quiet place, and I'm feeling like, ooh, I feel guilty like all the time. I'm never with my kids. Oh my gosh, like I feel kind of bad. I think that is the biggest thing, is to build more awareness about how am I spending my time, where am I putting my energy, how am I feeling, how's everybody feeling around me, how, what are the needs that I am not filling for other people. I agree with you. I think there are plenty of moms who are out there like so career driven that their kids do fall by the wayside, that their needs are not taken care of fully. Um, I think most moms are doing both things simultaneously and feeling like they're not doing it well, but there definitely are those moms who are pushing too hard in one direction or the other. And I think the big question to ask yourself in those moments is like, why? Why do I need to be so driven from a career perspective? What's it going to get me? Or why do I need to fill every single need for my kids? And is that going to actually be unhealthy for them in the long run? Are they actually going to end
Mhm.
up spoiled or end up not able to deal with life's difficulties, not able to cope, not able to have resilience? So I think finding the balance is probably in slowing down,
Yeah.
in building more awareness, in not moving so fast through life so that you can actually take stock of the carnage around you, either in your own personal
Yeah.
life or for your family.
One of the things that I found was helpful, when my kids were, say, in junior high and high school, I would ask them, because I traveled a bit too, doing a lot of speaking, and I would say, "Am I gone too much? Am I, is this too much? Is this?" And they tell you, and I'd say,
Mhm.
"Okay," and then I would, and it's not that I wanted my kids to run my schedule, but I needed to know how they were, and kids are usually pretty honest with you. How would you advise a mother who says, "Now, I really want to work part time, but um, I really want to work part time, but my best friends all stay home. I should do that." Or the at home mom that says, "You know what? I really need to get out of here a little bit. But I don't want to be like my friends who are working full time." How do you help mothers find their sweet spot? Or can
Yeah.
they?
I absolutely think you can find your sweet spot. Uh, I think this comes back to being able to be quiet with yourself and figure out what do you want, and asking yourself, why do I care? Which we all do this, but like, why do I care so much more about what other people are doing than what's going to make me happy and fulfilled at the end of my life? When I hit 85 years old, 90, 100 years old, God willing, you know, I only have me. My kids will be, they'll be doing their own thing. I'm sure my husband will be dead by
Mhm.
then, statistically speaking. Like, it's going to be only me at the end of my life. And so I
Mhm.
only have
Statistically,
and so
yeah.
I only
Yeah.
have me to answer to. And so how am I going to feel? And then I think the other thing is what you
Mhm.
said about how you're a much better mom when you are happy and fulfilled. So I am a much better mom to my kids when I have had my time to go write my books, which is the thing I love to do the most, is just to write or write essays.
Mhm.
I am a much better mom to my kids when I have done some movement in the day. I am a much better mom to my kids when I have spent a date
Mhm.
night with my husband every once in a while. Not every night, but like every once in a while. So I think that awareness, is like building in, when do I feel like I am in a flow state, when do I feel like, okay, things are in a good rhythm, things are relatively balanced. And if you haven't felt that way in a long time or ever, it's about giving yourself permission to do that for a day, for an hour, for 15 minutes. A lot of times I'll get feedback. I'm sure you've heard this in your pediatrics practice, from other moms that are like, well, I know that's nice what you say about spending 5 minutes alone in your car, like listening to your favorite Beyonce song before you go into the house, so that way you feel like you're in a good spot when you go home. That's like a piece of advice that I give moms. Like, if you can't spend a bunch of time by yourself and taking care of yourself, amazing. Just spend 5 minutes, park your car around the corner, listen to your favorite song or NPR episode or whatever it is you want to do, and then go into the house so you feel like your cup is a little more full. And people will say, I can't do that. Moms are like, I can't do that. I don't have time. I'm like, well, that is the problem. That right there is the problem. I think that means like, we're not valuing ourselves, that we don't deserve 5 minutes to ourselves. We are human beings. You and I know that our nervous systems, when we are running in that fight or flight, when we are constantly going, we are constantly doing, we are constantly feeling like, oh, I'm not getting enough done, we go into reaction mode. We act like, evolutionarily, like we are in a jungle with a tiger running behind us. And so we know that we're not able to make decisions that are good for our long-term life. When we're able to slow down, our bodies can go into rest and digest. We are much more present. Our executive functioning turns on, and we're able to make decisions that work better for ourselves and for our kids and for our family at large. I was going to say, I do want to say one thing that might sound controversial for working moms, but believe me, I have days where I am under my breath, like, I can't believe my life. I hate my life. I can't believe, why do I have these kids? Oh my gosh, they're so annoying. I just need to scream in the car, blah, 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 blah. But for the vast majority of us who have kids and are working, we did sign up for this. I signed up for this. This is a choice that I made in my life. I love my kids. I want the best for them. So I can choose to all day, every day complain about my life and the fact that my kids are like an extra quote unquote burden in my life. Or I can have some radical acceptance around, I live in an imperfect world. I have imperfect kids. I have multiple things that I'm juggling. I made this choice. And so I can choose to change some things in my life, but I'm never going to change the fact that I have kids. And so this is it. So now what am I going to do? And I think that sometimes when you stop being like, oh my gosh, I have so much, all the kids, I can never do this. Like, that allows you to stop kind of like only whining about it and start to make change and make a life that you actually feel good about.
I'm glad you said that, because as I look at, what you're describing in your work in this blueprint, it really is a journey. And I think that we have to realize there are going to be days when we may be screaming in the car. I remember driving, we have 4 kids, driving the kids around. We had a big Suburban, and it was so stressful. I'd pull the car off to the side and I'd say, I can't drive because you're screaming so much. And but life isn't always going to stay that way. So when mothers out there do this centered life blueprint, this is your goal, but you can't always have it work that way that day. I mean, everything can blow up in a moment and then be put back right over the next week and then blow up in a moment. So I think we have to be really, really patient with ourselves, because I think sometimes we look at, like at the beginning, we look at our friends, we go, oh, they're all in order, and I'm trying to do this, and I did this exercise and my life is still crummy. That's okay. I mean, it doesn't say that you aren't going to have some horrible days when you're like, why did I have all these kids? And so it's really, really important. We only have a few minutes left, but I did want to talk about this idea of self-care. And what I see in a lot of moms, which I think is where the Surgeon General's report, where it came out talking about what a high percentage of parents, moms, feel anxious. And that is, I think that when it comes to our emotional well-being, whether we have depression, whether we have anxiety, whatever, we tend to just sort of suck it up and deal with it and then just move on. But that's one of the worst things you can do for your kids, because if you're an anxious mother and your kids are going to feel it. If you have depression and you pretend it's not
Mm-hmm.
there, your kids are going to feel it. So what I often tell mothers is really one of the best things you can do for your kids, because a lot of times moms are motivated according to what's going to help their kids, not them. One of
Mm-hmm.
the best things you can do for your kids is to do whatever you can to be emotionally balanced and healthy. So, can you talk a little bit about
Mm-hmm.
mothers dealing with um, admitting or understanding if they have anxiety and then what to do about it, or if they feel emotionally off? Because you were talking a lot about mothers sort of saying, well, how do I feel with this and how do I feel with that? Um, it's hard to look at your feelings, but if you could just give moms a few tips about how they can identify if emotionally they're off and what to do about it. And how do they give themselves permission to do something about it?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I agree that if you are a mom listening to this, we're not trying to put extra pressure on you, but it is true that your mental health and the state that you're in affects your kids greatly. It's one of the biggest indicators of how they're going to do. So, the more that you can work on yourself, it's not selfish. It's helping them. It's helping your kids over time. So, 100%, yes. Number two, what I want to say is self-care. We've made it an industry. We've made it a thing that people get, like bubble baths and chocolates and go on a big retreat with their friends. To me, self-care is not about bubble baths and chocolate. It's about, how do I create a life that I don't want to escape from every single day?
Mhm.
So I am with you.
Yeah.
I have last week was in the car with my kids, pulled over and said, "You're screaming so much that I can't drive." I mean, that this happens to me all the time. Um,
No, not
I
you, not
have
you who write the book. Yeah, yeah,
yes, me. Yes, me. I have an
yeah.
autistic child who has anxiety.
Mhm,
I
mhm,
have a second child who has OCD and anxiety. I have anxiety. And so, what I've had to do in order to make sure that we have the best chance possible is to deal first with my own emotional regulation. I had to choose activities every single day that down regulate my nervous
mhm,
system, that allow me to say, like, whew, okay, I'm all right. Whether that is, instead of watching a TV show that's going to like elevate my heart rate, reading a book on the couch so that that way I feel like I'm more relaxed. Whether that is making sure that I move my body every single day, whether that is making sure that I get the rest that I need. Some of us are very sensitive to rest. I know that I am. Whether that is going and figuring out, if you're feeling like you are constantly on edge, you're constantly nervous, you're constantly worried, or you're constantly angry, because we know that that can be a symptom of anxiety and depression, or constantly feeling down, that you go and get help from a mental health professional who could help you to figure out exactly what's going wrong and can get you on track. And again, it doesn't mean you're going to be perfect. I pulled over the car last week, but it does mean it's going to help you to, more percentage of the time, feel like you're in a good spot so that you can respond to your kids, so that you can deal with your life in a way that makes you feel like you don't have to escape it. So I think there's a combination. There's a combination of doing the things that are going to set you up for as much success as possible from a physical and a mental perspective. And then there's also the figuring out exactly what is your wiring. How are you designed? What are the different environmental impacts that are influencing you? Getting the therapist, going to the mental health professional who can prescribe you the medication if that's what you need for a short period of time, right? All of us have different things that we need to be able to cope effectively, but you are worth it, and it's worth it for your kids to do those things.
I love your description of creating a life that you're not constantly trying to avoid or run from or leave behind. Escaping the negative
Mm-hmm.
rather than trying to create the positive. You go, oh, okay, I can understand
Mm-hmm.
that. My guest has been Dr. Whitney Casares. She is author of Doing It All, Stop Overfunctioning and Become the Mom and Person You're
Yeah.
Meant to Be. And she's also the founder of Modern Mommy Doc. Um, Dr. Casares, how can people learn more about you if they would like to find you?
Yeah, so you can go to my website, modernmommydoc.com. I have freebies that are on there that are about parenting in partnership with another person. I have ones about self-care and this idea of creating a life that you don't want to escape from. I have a new one on body confident kids that I just put out. So modernmommydoc.com. And then on social media, I do hang out the most in two places. You can find me on LinkedIn at Whitney Casares, or you can find me at Modern Mommy Doc on Instagram.
Many professionals invest in an executive coach for personal development and a trainer for physical fitness. Now you can hire me, a best-selling author and expert coach, to help you raise great kids. I've over 35 years practicing pediatrics and an extensive experience decoding what your kids need and think about you. I've helped countless parents just like you. You can talk directly with me through private or group coaching. I'll listen and provide a customized plan to help you be the best dad you can be. Sign up now through the link in the episode notes. Your kids are counting on you. Let's make your family's future brighter together.